everyone, and welcome to Booming Encore's Learning Bites. My name is Susan Williams, and I'm the founder of Booming Encore. And today I'm delighted to welcome Olivia Auclair. Olivia was a study author of some very interesting research conducted at McGill University that discovered that making some specific changes to our diet could not only increase our longevity, but also reduce our carbon footprint. So welcome, Olivia. So glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So rather than me kind of explaining, why don't you explain a little bit about the research and some of the main findings you had?
Yeah, so ultimately, we worked with a national nutrition survey that was conducted here in Canada back in 2015. And what we did is we modeled simple partial replacements of 25 and 50% of either red and processed meat or dairy with a variety of different plant protein foods in individuals' diets. So to stay as close as possible with each respondent's personal preferences, we tried to do these replacements with plant protein foods in the proportions in which they were already consumed by the respondents. So if somebody had consumed legumes and beef, we would have replaced their beef intake with legumes. That's just a very simple example. And if they didn't consume any plant protein foods, we use the proportions of the overall sample. But ultimately, when we did those replacements, we were looking at three outcomes of interest. The first were nutrient inadequacies. The second were health outcomes. So this were changes to life expectancy. And we were also interested in looking at changes to our diet-related carbon footprint. Um, and so that's what we did. And we found some pretty interesting things. So first and foremost, we found that there were co-benefits of partially replacing our red and processed meat intake with plant protein foods across all three of these outcomes. So we found that life expectancy increased on average by 9 months. And we also found that the diet-related carbon footprint of Canadians was decreased by 25%. On the other hand, when we did these same replacements, but with dairy, we found that there were smaller changes to life expectancy, smaller reductions to the diet-related carbon footprint, and also we saw a trade-off with calcium inadequacy. So there was an increase a percentage of the population that were no longer meeting their requirements for calcium, and this was a 14% increase. So those were our findings in a nutshell.
Okay, so basically power to the plants then, I guess. But when you mentioned like replace the red meat and processed meats with plant proteins, can you kind of expand sort of? I know you mentioned legumes, but other options that people might want to consider?
Yeah, so we took examples from Canada's food guide mainly. So what these include things like nuts and nut butters, peanut butters, almond butters, seeds, legumes, which include lentils, beans, peas. We also included tofu and other soy-based meat alternatives, as well as fortified soy beverages, which we replaced with cow's milk in the dairy scenarios.
And so
Um,
just to repeat, this wasn't a complete elimination of red meats and processed. It was just actually cutting back. So wasn't it like just to twice a week rather than 4 times a week or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So that was part of, what we wanted to do here is, well, part of the rationale for the study was that were the changes that happened to Canada's food guide in 2019. And so they sort of got rid of traditional food groups like the milk and alternatives, the meat and alternatives, and now the food groups, the food guide is depicted by a plate. And so half the plate contains fruits and vegetables, a quarter whole grains, and the last quarter is protein foods. And they also specifically recommend that we consume protein from plants every day. So we sort of took that and we're like, okay, we're supposed to be consuming more plant protein foods. And so that we really wanted to do these simple partial replacements of our animal with plant protein foods. And what we found was interesting because it shows that we don't have to completely eliminate animal products from the diet. It's really making these simple partial replacements with red and processed meat specifically that showed that there are co-benefits across multiple dimensions of sustainability.
Yeah, including the environment, as you mentioned, which is great. Now, our audience tends to be a little bit older. Making these changes later in life, what kind of impact? Like, will it still have an impact on the longevity or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we looked at the average changes to life expectancy, so I can't really like give like an exact number or anything like that, but definitely making these changes no matter what age you are can impact your health and your wellness, and your longevity as well, because the how we got to these changes to life expectancy are was by using data for relative risks or risks associated with certain diseases, particularly heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and colorectal cancers that are associated with our consumption of these different animal and plant protein foods. So if we're, consuming more plants and less red and processed meat, we're seeing these increases to life expectancy from reductions to our disease risk. So yeah, I definitely would say that no matter what age you're making these changes, certainly I think, well, everybody's different, but I certainly think that there would be, we would still see these co-benefits.
That's great. So, I mean, so to everybody out there, I mean, you might want to really start taking a good close look at your diet. It definitely has some linkage to your longevity and your health. And if you can introduce some plant-based proteins rather than necessarily eating some red meat or processed meat, it may actually even have some extra benefits. So, thanks so much for your time, Olivia. I really appreciate it, and congratulations on this study. It's some really good news for us to, put in our hands and actually possibly learn from it and actually apply.
Thank you so much for having me.
And to everybody out there, I hope you found this information valuable and it helps you live your best booming encore. Bye for now.